Gen Z is entering the workforce with new perspectives and expectations.
In this podcast, we're here to listen to their stories and experiences, their successes and frustrations, and help employers understand the mindset and perspectives of the up-and-coming workforce.
Employers can't dictate what their young employees find meaningful. What they can do, however, is empower them to create their own sense of purpose and authentic connections.
Our curriculum is designed to help them do exactly that. East Valley Leader Lab is committed to paving the way for more curious, engaged, and connected young professionals in the workplace.
Hi, I'm Amanda Stradling, and this is Tim Eskew. We are the East Valley Leader Lab. This is our podcast, Mind and Body at Work. If our content resonates with you, we hope that you will click on the link in the show notes and check out the description of our newest offer, Helping Gen Z Thrive at Work. And as always, like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel or to wherever else you get your podcasts. Thanks for joining us today.
Great, thanks, Amanda. I'd like to introduce our guest for today's show. Our guest is Cameron Santiago. Cameron, thanks for being with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So let me tell our listeners a little bit about you. Cameron is the Director of Career Advisor Planning for a Fortune 90 financial services firm where he helps grow and develop financial advisors and their businesses. He has 5 years of experience in finance and a bachelor's degree in management and leadership. And I just want to share my assessment, Cameron, not to embarrass you, but we've had a lot of very talented people on the show at different stages of entering their career. And you've been in your career a little longer than some of them, but in 5 years, what you've accomplished is really impressive. So if I was 26 or 27 years old and had just entered or was entering the workforce, I would want to know more about how this all came about. So I hope our listeners will approach it from that perspective.
Absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure.
Great.
So Amanda, you want to start?
Yeah, Cameron, can you tell us a little bit about what got you going? What inspired this journey? What's your background with college? And what brought you here?
Yeah, absolutely. I was one of the first people in my family to go to college. And so it was always an aspiration of mine to be really education focused, right? I did really well in school. School was really important to me. But when it came to college, I just wasn't sure how that was going to happen. College famously is incredibly expensive. And I also didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life, right? I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. And so where some folks come out of high school and they're like, I'm going to be a doctor, and they sort of chart the path for that. I knew I wanted to do something potentially business related. I had no idea what that would look like. And so I thought, okay, I don't know what I want exactly. And I know that college is expensive. So I chose to go the community college route. And
So
that
smart.
I think is one of the best choices I made, I think, when kind of laying the foundation for where I am right now. And the sort of lessons I got from that first couple of years of college, it wasn't necessarily just the academics, which were incredibly important, but being in community college and being around so many different types of people at different stages in their lives, I think really primed me for what I could expect to join the workforce. And that was hugely important for me. And so it was actually through a lot of the work that I did in those first couple of years of undergrad that I was able to figure out I did want to go into management and leadership. I love the people aspect of being in an organization. And so, that sort of led me to pursue the management and leadership pathway at Portland State University. And I went through that and got my bachelor's degree. And at the same time was building this sort of foundation in finance while going to school full time. So that is kind of how I got to this place.
That's awesome. I hear that you have great interest in business and great knowledge in finance, but also that something you really care about is connecting with people. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I I found that one of the things that has made me so successful to this point in my career and in my life is my ability to connect and to build relationships. You can always be the smartest person in the room and the person with the best ideas, but if you can't connect with people and you can't get them bought into what you're saying or what you believe in, or just like foster good relationships where people want to know more about you and connect with you and work towards a goal with you, it just, in my opinion, just makes it very hard to like continue on an upward track. And so I think if you can convince people that you know you are smart, you are capable, and also be someone that people want to connect with, I think that that just makes work easier, but it also makes it easier to grow, in my opinion, in my experience. So,
That's perfect and such an important aspect of leadership. That's great.
I was going to ask, speaking of growth, so we had one other conversation before, and I think you mentioned working part-time in a bank or banks.
mhm.
How did that play into your, both your college experience and, was it a hassle or was it something that you benefited from? And then, how much did it impact your choice of what you wanted to do later?
Yeah, absolutely. I think working in college is, most of us have to do it, right? I mean, I've met very few people who didn't have to work through college. And I think the benefit to that is it teaches you time management because you either do it or you don't, right? You make it work
Oh,
or you don't make it work.
absolutely.
And that, I think, really set me up for when I was able to work full time and I didn't have to juggle school at the same time. Um, it made the time management piece easier. And so I think those two things really worked well together when I was first starting my career. I think banking is a great way to get your sort of toes in the water in the finance world. Um, Banking, it didn't necessarily help me figure out what I wanted to do, but it did help me figure out what I didn't want to do, which I think sometimes can be, you know, just as helpful information as knowing what you do want. And I think that it was in banking where I got so burnt out on people because I'm, talking to sometimes 60 to 80 clients a day, working on a teller line or something like that, where I was like, okay, love people, maybe not too many people, maybe an environment where I can foster deeper, closer relationships. And, by nature, that looks like kind of paring down how much people time, if you will, that includes, right? And so I think banking is kind of what led me really to being in financial services because it is, it gives you an arena where you can develop those deeper, stronger relationships and still be involved in, business and finance um, without having to do it in necessarily a volume-based way. So,
I really like your point about, like both of them, but I really like your point about learning time management. Very short story. Many decades ago, I was in college, and my freshman year, I did not work, but I mastered the very important skill of throwing a frisbee with my feet.
yep,
Unfortunately, my accomplishments in school were not so great. And then the next year, I got a job because I had to, and everything started going on a better trajectory after that because you're juggling multiple things. You have to pay attention. You have to be focused. So I know that helped me a lot as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
In my first 2 years of college, I did community college also, like you did. And I worked two jobs. I opened a business with my friends, a martial arts school, and also I worked at an ice cream shop. And yeah, and got all my classes in. And then the next 2 years, I had two babies. So that was fun. A little
Yeah,
harder than the job
absolutely.
thing, I think. But
Yeah, for still learning how to juggle, right? All those different things that come down the pipeline, for sure.
yep. Definitely. A point you made that I really like that I think is going to resonate with a lot of our listeners, you brought up burnout and how that can come around from a misfit of your skills. something that you knew you cared about, something you knew you were good at, wasn't being used in quite the right way, and that was wearing you down.
Mhm.
I really like that you recognized that and that you didn't have to totally switch industries, but you found a way to fit those skills more appropriately in a way that was filling you rather than draining you. Any tips on to our listeners on how they can recognize that and maybe do that for themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the first piece about burnout, like there's some situations, right, where you're experiencing burnout that is like mind, body, and soul, right? And I
Oh, for
think that's
sure.
really common with those of us who put our everything into work. I'm definitely that person. I've tried to like balance that, but I do care a lot about what I do. And sometimes when you're not nurturing yourself outside of work, the way you do inside of work, it creeps up that way. And I think that um, doing really critical reflection and talking about how I felt about what my day to day looked like and what I was doing when I wasn't actively feeling, stressed or angry or frustrated because of a bad day. I think that was a really important piece because, you can go to work and have a bad day and come home and just be like, all right, and sort of lay a blanket statement or put yourself in this box, right, mentally about how you feel about the whole situation. And I think for me, it took, you know, coming home, shaking off the bad day, and then actually thinking about, okay, what made today hard, right? What's made the last few days hard? Is it the company? Probably not. Is it my coworkers? Hopefully not. And so I was able to really kind of tease down exactly what it was that wasn't aligning with what I wanted out of my work experience. And it was the volume of people I had to interact with and the sort of social agility that's required when you're in those customer facing, often customer service type roles. You're doing that 40 hours a week, right? That can weigh you down pretty quickly. So I think the best way to do that is to think about what doesn't work when you're not upset or frustrated. I think that's when the most productive reflection happens.
I love that you allowed your emotions to inform you, but not necessarily drive the whole decision. You listened to your body, you listened to your emotions and how you were feeling, but you did it, like you said, at a time when it wasn't as heightened and you were able to use both your logic and your feelings together and work through that and make the decision that worked for you. I think that's really wise advice.
Absolutely. I think I appreciate that. And I think people say a lot, feelings aren't facts. And I think there is a grain of truth to that. I think sometimes maybe that's said in scenarios where it's not the most contextually appropriate. But I think when you're thinking about large lifestyle changes or life decisions, right? Like quitting your job, changing industries, whatever it is, it's important to balance those two things and to like really think about what do the feelings actually mean and like what is the larger thing that it points to. And I just think that that's important.
Yeah, but one thing we teach a little bit in the Leader Lab is when you're initially feeling that surge of emotion from whatever stressful situation you're in, it usually only lasts around 90 seconds, that your body's first response can pass. And I think it's important to have a practice in your body to kind of help feel that, name it, acknowledge it, but also let it move through you
Mhm.
and not create an entire mood and attitude around it that you bring to work. I think that's really important. And then you can still use that information, but just not as the primary determining factor.
Absolutely.
So we've talked a little bit about your journey. Thanks for sharing. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing now. It's a big title, Director of Career Advisor Planning. Tell us a little bit about what that's like day to day and what you like about it.
Yeah, so it's a role that my firm and I actually kind of came up with to address a series of strategic challenges that were facing us. The term career advisor applies to financial advisors who, have their feet in the ground, right? They're really well rooted. Their practices are established. They have a consistent client base. They're not in that first, really 3 to 5 years where building a financial services practice is a grind, right? You're pulling long hours, you're doing a ton of outreach, you're doing a ton of market building. And so, we as an entity, we're focusing a lot of time on those newer advisors, right? Really trying to help them get up to speed and have the best experience they could with starting their business. And at the same time, we saw that there was some opportunity to further support our career advisors, right? Because there's, a whole litany of, you know, development opportunities and performance opportunities that come once you've established your practice. And so my job essentially is to go into these practices and to take an inventory of what is getting in the advisor's way of seeing new clients and kind of doing what they do best, which is connecting with their clients and taking care of their book. And if they're on a growth path, identifying the things that are stopping them from doing that. And so what we found is that most often that looks like a lot of back office work, right? So paperwork, filing, a lot of those things, service, client service, account service. And then it also looked like, their learning gaps and the tools that we have to our exposure, right? So do the advisors know how to best use our CRM? Are they doing good workflow tracking? Are they spending a ton of time just trying to figure out if they did something because they don't have a system that works for them? And so it's really intended to be a role in a program that caters to the advisors and what they need and what their practice needs for a set amount of time. And so it's a really wide range of things. It's everything from helping them with, back office work to identifying opportunities to figuring out ways to grow. And that's, kind of the wave tops of what that looks like. But I wear a lot of hats in that role. So.
Wow.
So just one thing to clarify, these career advisors, are they financial advisors?
Yes.
Okay. So they're not out advising people about their careers. They're advising people about their wealth and the money they're trying to save and what to do with it and that sort of thing.
Correct.
Okay. So, what's really interesting to me, Cameron, is, we've had some experts on the show and they talk about how some young people entering the workforce get very excited about helping improve things, but they don't always have much success convincing their older coworkers, how great things would be if we did this instead of doing that, or et cetera. That there's a real art to having influence when you're just getting started. So it sounds to me like, you're advising people that in many cases are several years older than you, further into their career. What's your secret? How do you have them not, say, what do you know? I've been here longer than you.
Yeah, absolutely. To that point, I have absolutely had folks come to me and say, well, what do you know? Why should I listen to you? And most of the time it's in good faith, it comes from a good place.
They're curious, right?
They are. Yeah. And I think tying back to the relationship piece, I think the most important piece to that is building a relationship. I think, there's a couple of things that you need to acknowledge off the bat, right? These advisors wouldn't be working with me if I wasn't credible, right? So they know to some degree that they're working with me because I do bring something to the table that they need or that they can benefit from. And so beyond that, it's building trust, it's building rapport, it's earning their business to an extent, right? And I think that if you can go to a young person who's wants to go into an organization of influence, I think your first step is showing folks that you can do the job well, right? That comes from the competence piece. And then it's connecting with them, right? It's showing them that You care about where they're coming from. You care about their perspective. And I think those are the two main ingredients to doing that. I think beyond that, it's also really important to understand why someone is doing what they're doing or why an organization does what it does. Um, I have found that if you can get to the why behind a process, a system, a behavior sometimes, um, it can actually sort of help with that trust building, that rapport building, and that confidence building, right? Um, and so those I think are kind of the three things that you have to have in play. And those things take time, right? Like you're not going to be a new hire within the first 6 months and expect that you're going to be able to influence people the way that you want to if what you think is going to be some kind of a large scale change is supposed to help, right? So I think patience is also really important with that.
Great. So we have competency, connection,
Hmm.
finding the why, and patience.
Yeah,
Great. That's awesome. Good
absolutely.
tips.
Thank
Um,
you.
can we ask you what is your why for work?
Yeah, absolutely. This is such an interesting question. I feel like it changes. It's never been static. I think my why right now is my family. It's my husband. It's the future we want together. It's making sure that my family's taken care of. I work as hard as I do, and I do the things that I do, not just for me, but for the people that I care about. And I think that's usually kind of the driving force. But I'm not a person who is comfortable with being bored. I like to be challenged. I like to feel like what I'm doing matters and is engaging. And so selfishly, part of why I work is and why I do what I do is I love the challenge. I love the, I guess, neuroplasticity that is required of the kind of work that I do and the creative problem solving and um, those kinds of things. It keeps me going, right? It gives me like a reason to stay focused, a reason to learn new things. So I would say that's what my why is right now.
That's fabulous. It'll keep your brain young forever, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to go back to influence for just a minute because I had
Mhm.
another question. Um, so when you are doing this advising, are you usually virtual or are you in person, or does
I
it
am
depend?
fully remote. So
Remote.
I work
Okay.
with advisors in different states, but
Okay.
I'm based in Oregon. So,
Okay.
mhm,
So you talked about the importance of building trust.
mhm.
Um, and I'm particularly interested in, are you aware of any nonverbal things you do when you're just meeting these people and, they've been told they're going to meet with this person who's going to help them a little bit? Um, are you aware of anything that you do nonverbally to help with the trust?
It's a really good question. I think something I work consciously on that I really make a good point to do is if I'm in this format, if I'm on Zoom, right? I make my best effort to imply that I'm making eye contact, right? It can be a little hard when you're virtual, but I
Yeah, like
think that
where
eye
is the
contact,
camera?
exactly, yeah.
Yeah,
So like if I pull up my, whatever app I'm using to meet with folks on and they're on the left and I'm on the right, but my camera is on the left, I'm going to switch around kind of where I put these things, um, just so that they feel like I'm present, I'm listening, this is a dialogue. I'm not just here to, check some boxes or fill out a questionnaire or, move on to the next thing. So I think eye contact is really important with that. And then I think the practice of active listening, I think there's a lot of nonverbal things that you can pick up on there, even if you're not in person. Um, so an example is pauses, right? Like taking pauses in a way that communicates rather that you're digesting what they said. You're trying to sort of pick out what are the important pieces of what you're talking about. I think when you're in conversation and you make people feel rushed, right? Like that's not the best way to sort of build those building blocks of trust. And I think the same thing goes over the phone, frankly. I mean, I think there's a lot of folks who have some thoughts about Gen Z and phone etiquette, and they never want to answer the phone, they don't want to talk on the phone, and there's a little bit of truth to that. I won't lie, but I think that working on your phoning skills and just how you're able to show up, in those conversations as well, I think is really important. Those are two things I do all day, every day.
That's great. Thanks for answering that one, because our podcast is Mind and Body at Work. And at the Leader Lab, we focus a lot on what our body does for our leadership and our work effectiveness. So that ties right in with our whole thing. So thank you. That's a great tip.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the things that we have read organizations complaining about the current generation of young professionals is they don't seem very loyal. Like, they don't stay in one place very long. They don't know how long they're going to be here. They don't know if they should invest in them. Have you been with the same firm for 5 years, or how long have you been there?
Yeah, I've been with this firm for 3.5 of the 5 years I've been in the industry.
Okay. That's good.
And how do you think about your career future? I mean, I'll just leave it at that. I'm just curious what you think.
Yeah, I think there's a balance, right? I think the way I think about tenure and the concept of loyalty and where I stay is, I try to make it a symbiotic relationship as much as possible. And, for me, for the longest time, like, my firm has taken really good care of me. And therefore, I care about what I do. I care about the people that I work with. I care about the lives that I impact. And so I continue to choose to show up every day with my best foot forward, win, lose, or draw, and do my best. And I think, again, it's a two-way street, right? If you're a new person joining a new organization, you have to build trust. You have to build relationships, and that does look like being there, being on time, putting your best foot forward, having a good attitude. And time will tell if the company or the team or the organization takes care of you and you take care of it. Like, you'll see how that plays out in your life. And I've been really fortunate to be with a firm that's taken good care of me, and has helped make my life, my day-to-day life at work, function and things like that. So.
Do you mind if I ask a follow-up?
Yeah, definitely.
So what are some of the things that, look like taking good care of you from the company's standpoint? What do you appreciate about what they do?
Yeah, I think, I had, when I was finishing my bachelor's degree and working full time, I had a reasonable degree of flexibility, right? My managers knew that I was pursuing a bachelor's degree full time in addition to working in the office 8 to 5 every day. And that I was sort of fitting these things around the rest of my life and my schedule. And so when it came to conversations about, learning and development within the company, right? If I needed to get an additional license or certifications, those kinds of things, there was an understanding of like what timeline could be reasonable based on the fact that I'm already, spending 40 to 50 hours a week, doing the learning, right, outside of work. And that was huge for me. I mean, I got a lot of flexibility from them on that. I also think, the policy around PTO, it is accrued PTO. I don't work for, a company that does unlimited PTO. But everybody makes an effort to make sure that everyone can take their time, right? And so that means like all of us being mindful of scheduling PTO around, if somebody's already got this week off, we'll sort of work around that. I was really fortunate to work with a team of people who we all try to take care of each other, which I think is rare. I have not had that in every job that I've been in. And so I think flexibility, PTO, not necessarily just letting people take time off whenever, but demonstrating like, hey, we're willing to work with you. We're willing to try to make things work as much as we can. You know, I think those were two things that really helped me feel taken care of because I was able to nurture myself outside of work, right? So,
Yeah, great examples, and interesting that one of them is something that's probably a corporate policy about education, and then the
mhm.
other one is really just kind of the people that are there and taking care of each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very great. Um, so let's see. What are some things about your current work environment that kind of put you off? Anything that
Mm,
you don't love?
that's a I haven't thought about this actively in a while. I think the thing that I love can also be the thing that puts me off the most, and it is the people, right? The finance is a growing industry. It's with every passing day becoming more and more diverse. Um, and that's a good thing. And there's still this old guard, if you will, of folks who, you know, there's the same folks who probably not everybody, but some folks who probably share this idea that Gen Z's lazy, they're not loyal, they don't want to come to work, those kinds of things. And that sort of perspective, I think, bleeds into different parts of the organization, right? In different areas of leadership. And while my specific firm hasn't quite, you know, engaged in that, which I'm very grateful for. There's still plenty of people in the industry that I
Yes.
have interacted with that absolutely sort of have that perspective and have that mentality. And that can be really off-putting. I mean, I avoid talking about how old I am, how far I am out of school, what year I was born, all of those things as much as I can because there is this sort of assumption that based on my age or all of these things, how much credibility I have and how I got to where I am and all of those things. And so I would say that can really put me off. And then I also think, you know, currently I'm fully remote and I work from home, and that's an incredible privilege and blessing in so many ways. But I also think that I I wish more organizations put time and effort into coming up with hybrid solutions for employees because I think everybody could use a little bit of flexibility, right? A little bit of flexibility when it comes to work from home, a little bit of flexibility when it comes to time required in office. Um, you know, not having to rush home and get dinner on by 6 o'clock every night so that we might have a fighting chance at going to bed at a reasonable time is really nice. To the same token, it's often my dog and I here all day long, and the interaction I get is with my clients and with my advisors. And so those I think are two things that I think um, can be a little off-putting, but are definitely like areas of opportunity. Um, you know, as we look for more talent and things like that.
That's great. Addressing some really critical, like current issues there.
Yeah.
Do you have friends in your peer group that you get to talk about, this new thing of being at work? I mean, it's not real new for you, but
Sure.
relatively new. And what are those conversations like? What do you guys talk about in regards to being in the workforce in this day and age?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing that comes up, the most recurring theme is breakdowns in communication. And it's not nearly that straightforward, right? Like my friend isn't calling me up and saying, "Oh my gosh, I had such a breakdown in communication with this person." It's, you know, here's the situation. This is how this person responded. Isn't that crazy? And sometimes, if you want to be a good friend, you sort of validate what they're saying. You say, "Oh my gosh, yeah, I can't believe that happened." Um, but as a person in leadership, like I'm listening and I'm sort of thinking about, okay, like here's where we could have asked a clarifying question, or here's where you could have said, "Tell me more," instead of, coming to a conclusion and moving on, and then now you're sort of retroactively resentful about this interaction that you had. So those, I think the communication piece is something that my sort of peers who are newer to being in professional environments, being in the workforce, I think are struggling with. Um, and then I think I see, I still work with a lot of new advisors, typically, you know, college age, 22 to 26 maybe, sometimes a little younger, depending on if we have interns, things like that, who don't quite know the social contract yet. And I was there once, right? Like I, I
Yep.
had, made certain social faux pas and things like that. But I think learning about the social contract you know, and what I mean by that is like basic things like when you get an Outlook invitation, you should accept it instead of showing it as pending because that implies that you don't pay attention or you don't care. Or, using like being mindful of correct spelling, punctuation, grammar in work emails and, appropriate greetings and salutations and written communication, phone etiquette, right? Like not you know, really stringent, like rigid rules, but just general guidelines that when we are in an organization, generally speaking, most of us, you know, know to follow and things like that. And so I think that's where a lot of my peers get the most tripped up, is on communication and just the proverbial social contract, you know.
Quick follow-up on that.
Yeah.
Since you're remote, are you able to, do you have peers in the company that you are able to socialize with? How does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. We have ERGs, right? Employee resource groups. So I think that's one way that I've been able to do that. I do meet with my team at least once weekly, various members of my team. Um,
Nice.
and then I do get to go back to kind of where our home base is on a sporadic basis. And so I do get some of that in-person socializing as well. But I am fortunate that our company as a whole makes a lot of effort to create like digital connection opportunities for us.
That's
So
great.
yeah.
So it sounds like you're pretty happy with your current firm. Um, so, but if you were dreaming it up, what does your dream job look like?
I've got to be honest, I've not thought about at this stage in my life what my dream job looks like. Um, 5 years in, I've been so focused on doing the right thing and learning what does the industry look like and what does good look like and what does hitting all the marks look like. I haven't even taken time to think about what the most ideal combination of all those things would look like. I've got to be totally honest. Yeah.
Well, you've got so far already, I think that's just incredible. Um, yeah, it'll be interesting to see where you go from here.
And
Yeah. Thank you.
and if we were talking about this in one of our courses, we would recommend you think about this dream job in the context of what's really important to you, what do you really care about, and you are thinking about that because you brought it up earlier, and that does change, and there are different domains. So you talked about your family being kind of foremost right now as the why you work, but you should at some point give yourself some space and some time to think about, in the context of what's really important to me, what is my, what do I most want to be doing? Not for the sake of changing and leaving, but just, it can be in the context of the job you already have.
Absolutely.
That's great.
So we're already getting near the extension of the show. So we always like to give, you've given a lot of really good advice for our listeners. I knew you would, and we really appreciate it. Is there anything else that you'd like to share about your journey that you think might help others, or anything that you think is particularly important that we didn't touch on today?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we touched on loyalty a little bit earlier and like, what does that look like? And I think while it's important to go into any new role and new experience with a desire to do your best and to be a team player and to, you know, take care of those who are taking care of you. Um, I also think, you know, it's okay to leave. It's okay to realize that an opportunity doesn't work for you. It doesn't work for your lifestyle. Maybe it's not what you thought it was, right? So much of entering the workforce, like I said earlier, is figuring out what doesn't work for you or what you don't want to do. And I think that, you know, there's a lot of sort of murkiness around how do you go about that when you realize that something isn't what you want to do anymore or an environment doesn't work for you. How do you navigate that? And I would just say, um, sort of the through line of everything I've talked about today is relationships. And I think um, so long as the environment fosters it, it's so important when you are choosing to leave that you are leaving in a way where, as much as you can, you're leaving folks in the organization better than you found it. And part of that is leaving on good terms as much as you can, right? Not every situation is perfect. There are all kinds of unexpecteds and unknowns and things like that when you do decide to leave an organization. But leaving those experiences grateful and on good terms with the people that you worked with and your leaders and things like that, I think it's just so important. And it helps down the line in ways that you're not going to really expect when you first leave an organization. I think maintaining that network and maintaining those good relationships, even if it's a comment on a LinkedIn post, it's like, congratulations on your promotion or whatever, right? Just doing small things to keep those things going, I think, really will pay dividends down the line when you go to sort of expand your horizon and find new opportunities and things like that. You never know when you're going to need an introduction to somebody or a new connection or a referral or something like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, there's a young person I know that has been looking to move from a job he's had for a few years to a new job the last several months, and I had offered to help with some referrals and things. So I've talked to some of these potential employers, and to your point, he interviewed probably with 30 different organizations. He ended up taking a job with the person who hired him for the job he's in now. Someone who hired him years ago left the organization, and now they've hired him again. And that was a good relationship when he started at this job. So you just never know when you might run into people when paths might cross. So really, really good
Absolutely.
advice, I think, to leave those relationships in good shape, whether it was a great experience or not.
Mhm.
I also love that your generation is giving itself permission to leave, where, previous generations might have just stayed at that same company their whole life, where those opportunities aren't quite as readily available now, but also,
Mhm.
they didn't leave.
Yeah, absolutely. I think to this concept of symbiosis, right? Like a company, if they want to keep somebody, should demonstrate that they want to keep them, whether that's through pay and benefits, whether that's through culture, whether that's through growth and promotion opportunities. And to your point, we've got oodles of research that shows us that companies don't offer pensions anymore. They don't offer a lot of those things that they used to that kept people in their roles for 20, 30 years at a time. And so it's a push and pull, but I think if you're in an organization where you feel well paid and you like the people you work with and you like the work that you do, um, you know, it's easier to keep a job, in my opinion, than it is to find a job. And so, finding ways to continue to make that work for what is important to you and what you value and where you want to be, I think is really good.
Great.
Well, Cameron, it's been a pleasure meeting you. We've learned a lot from you, and we thank you for agreeing to be our guest.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
both. Thanks so much for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. And we also thank our listeners for being here. We hope you benefited as much as we did from hearing about Cameron's journey And we bid you to be well and keep moving. We'll see you next time.
This has been Mind and Body at Work with the East Valley Leader Lab. Please click on the link in the show notes for a description of our newest offer, Helping Gen Z Thrive at Work. This is our embodiment training to help new young workers integrate into your organization.
As always, if this content resonates with you and your cares, please like, share, and or subscribe to our YouTube channel or wherever it is you get your podcast. Be well and keep moving.